Good morning and welcome to our first installment of Fireside Chats with our founder for the year 2023. Joining us today is Jim Tompkins of Tompkins Ventures.
Hello, good to be with you, Nick.
Pleasure to have you, Jim. And as always, our founder and CEO, Shalabh Singhal.
Hi. Hi, Nick. Hi, Jim. Glad to be here.
Howdy, good to see you, Shalabh.
To see everyone as always. And the subject for today is what it takes to build a digital supply chain network. So we're going to kick off with the first question. We're going to put this out to both of you. We'll let you take the mic first, Jim, as you are our guest. And the first question is, what is a digital supply network and how does it work?
Well, boy, we have 4 hours for that, right? That's a big question. But what most people get confused with is what is a supply chain and what is a digital supply network. And a supply chain is actually an obsolete thought process of how we go from planning what we want to sell to taking it through production and through logistics and to the ultimate consumer. Because the reality is that the concept of a chain, we have a link and a link and a link, where the link touches the link before it and the link after it, is really kind of obsolete. Because what we need to do is we need to understand end-to-end network. And so there's literally hundreds of companies, be they transportation company, logistics companies, manufacturing companies, distribution, retail, that consist of a supply network. And if what we try to do in today's volatile world, we have this thing VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. With this VUCA in the world, there's lots of things that are changing. And so here, if we have a supply chain, the merchant is thinking, I'm going to have these products on my shelf on Tuesday. Well, the fact of the matter is the products haven't even been made yet. And the raw materials are sitting in Asia someplace. And so there's a lack of visibility because we're just looking one link down and one link up. And what we've got to do, instead of one down and one up, we've got to look at the entire end-to-end network. And it's only when we look at the entire end-to-end network that we can begin to understand how the activities are going according to plan and how we can replan and we can have a new plan as we go along so that we actually can have the product on the shelf when we want it. The reality is the traditional approach to supply chain is done link by link by link. And in fact, what we have is enterprise requirements planning systems, ERP, that is running a link. And its goal is to optimize the performance of that link. But that's irrelevant because having an optimal link has nothing to do with having a network that's working together to accomplish the objectives of moving from planning all the way to the customer while maximizing customer service and minimizing cost. And so what we need to do is in today's volatile world, is we need to digitize the network so that we have full end-to-end visibility of what's happening. And we have the tools, AI and ML, which allow us to make changes in the plan based on the reality that's occurring. And so the digital supply network is a way of getting product from its original planning, design, manufacture, all the way to the consumer in a way that's going to perform according to plan. A supply chain is something that simply won't work in today's volatile world in allowing us to perform. And so, everyone's favorite excuse these days is that the reason we haven't met this quarter's goal is because the supply chain is broken. Well, the supply chain is broken and it can't really be fixed. It needs to be replaced with a digital supply network.
Thank you, Jim. That was, a very comprehensive answer there and, certainly a lot to think about. Shalabh, same question to you. Love to get your thoughts on this.
So first of all, I think Jim has described this beautifully. And I think everyone who is going to watch this is going to have a very thorough understanding how digital supply networks can be imagined, right? But just to kind of add from my perspective, I think there are three flows which are important here. I think first is physical to digital, right? So when we think about digital supply networks, I think two terms are important here: digital and network. So digital is kind of replacing the typical physical mindset, and the network is replacing the chain, as Jim also mentioned about that it's not a link anymore, it has to be a network. So the first flow, physical to digital, I think a lot of signals and data needs to be captured from the physical world to create a digital record for supply chain somewhere. And then the second flow is digital to digital, where a lot of this information and records which have been captured, they need to be enriched, exchanged, processed. We need advanced analytics on this, artificial intelligence, to drive some meaningful insights from this. And then the third flow is digital to physical. With all these insights and information which has been generated, we need a way to communicate in the analog and physical world, where a lot of this actual physical supply chain operations or processes are happening, right? So thinking about a digital supply network in these three flows just help us to understand how the information flow needs to happen. And to further sum it up, I would say a key characteristics of a digital supply chain network are first, end-to-end transparency. One should be able to see across the network, right? The agility in the network to proactively operate rather than reactive approach to all the hassles or all the problems that can occur in our supply chain in day to day. Then building a truly connected environment where you can actually just through the network hop onto your suppliers or to your customers and have a visibility at that particular node. The fourth is resource optimization. Through this network, can we identify the right facility, right person, right machine, right resource for any job to be completed in a supply chain? And I think the most importantly, the holistic decision making, the ability to continuously learn and make optimal network decisions from all of this data. So yeah, I think this would be my thoughts on this topic.
Thank you very much for that, Shalabh. Certainly, a lot for us to unpack and think about here. And, the old adage, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, certainly comes to mind.
Yep.
Jim, we'll put this next question over to you. In what ways do digital chain networks differ from their linear and analog predecessors?
Well, I think the 5 points Shalabh makes about visibility and agility and connectivity and optimization has a lot of application here. I do take one a small word play with respect to the word of optimization. The concept of optimization is what I was trained to do. I have a PhD in industrial engineering, so I'm an expert on optimization. But in today's volatile world, optimization isn't really the goal. I believe the real goal should be optionality, not optimality. Because when things change, what I want to be able to do is go from one plan to another plan to another plan. And so I totally agree with Shalabh's answer, but I would use the word optimality, not optionality, because of where we are. To your question, which ties in with that point about optionality, is a analog supply chain in a undisrupted world works fine. If you look back at the last 100 years of supply chains, although supply chain hasn't been popular except for the last 3 years, the reality is we've all been doing supply chain for a long time, and supply chains worked. And the reason they worked is because we were able to assume certainty. So we had a business plan. This is how much we were going to sell. This is how much we were going to buy. This is how it was going to be done. This was the lead time. And we had a certainty to what was going to take place. And 95% what we planned took place. And the supply chain, the old analog supply chain, worked fine. And we were cool. But then what happened all of a sudden when 2020 hit, we no longer lived in a world that assumed certainty. We now were in a world where we had known uncertainty. And so instead of us doing 95% of the plan and having 5% that we had to kind of work around, now we have 95% that doesn't work and 5% that actually goes according to plan. And so when you go from assumed certainty to known uncertainty, you need to have a whole different level of resilience and agility and optionality to allow you to operate. And so the difference between in 2023, the difference between the supply chain, that's the old analog, and today's new digital supply network is the old supply chain doesn't work. It simply does not perform. That's why we couldn't buy tomato soups. That's why we can't buy toilet paper, is because the supply chain doesn't perform according to assumed certainty. And so in today's known uncertainty world, what we need is we need a single version of the truth where from the beginning to the end-to-end supply chain, everyone has the same view of what we're trying to accomplish. And when any place along that chain something changes, we all know that. And so therefore, we have the optionality to alter the plan to allow us to still accomplish the objective of providing the product to the customer when it's needed, which is, after all, the objective of supply chain. So we need a single version of the truth. You cannot do that with an analog one up, one down plan. You need to be end to end. Secondly, we need, and as Shalabh said this correctly, and I 100% agree, you need to have the AI, the ML, the tools that allow us to autonomously alter the plan as things occur. And that can only be done with a digital twin, and that's essentially what a digital supply network is. It's a digital twin. And then what we need to do is we need to be able to minimize the cost while we're orchestrating the solution for the customer in a way that we're giving them what they plan and what we plan according to what they're accomplishing. And even though, all this chain is making changes and changes and changes based on the ships not arriving, the ships being stuck at sea, this product not being made, the factory being shut down by COVID, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we're still going to have the ability to deliver. And that's at the highest level. An analog supply chain don't work, and a digital supply network does. And it's because of these capabilities that allow us to be agile, resilient, and optionality to perform.
Yeah, certainly a lot to think about there, Jim. And, nothing happens in a vacuum. So, transparency is always empowering. Excellent. And building on from that, Shalabh, what would you say are the critical components to establishing a robust digital supply network?
Yeah, interesting question, Nick. So I think when we think about digital supply networks as nodes of important processes, as well as facilities, stakeholders in the supply chain, I think, and just to build up on the your earlier question, which Jim very beautifully answered again, I think the analog or physical supply chains typically would have a planning function, a sourcing function, a manufacturing, product design, logistics, distribution kind of functions, right? So in even a digital supply network, these would be the components which would be there, right? But what also differentiates a digital supply network from a physical supply chain or analog supply chain is the other components, right? So things like Internet of Things. So sensors, hardware, which help in collection of a lot of data and then processing of this data throughout the supply chain. Advanced analytics, so your simulation capabilities, data science, machine learning, a lot of text analytics, your video and geospatial analytics. Now, these are the capabilities which have been leveraged very successfully in several supply chains. And essentially, for building a digital supply chain network, you really need all of these capabilities. Then comes your platforms, tools, infrastructure, right? So things like supply chain management softwares, transportation management softwares, warehouse management softwares, right, which are kind of essentially building that digital thread in the entire physical supply chain, and at the same time collecting a lot of data, and further their integration is becoming more important, right? So no more these systems can remain in silos. Your cloud providers, your blockchain applications, I think all of them can be clubbed into this category. And I think the last but like very important is the talent itself, right? So organizations need new talent to help adopt all of these technologies in their supply chains. We need to think about robots versus human optimization, how advanced wearable technologies can help typical workers in the supply chain to make them more efficient, right? So yeah, I think typically I would say that other than the functional supply chain, you need analytics, you need tools, infrastructure, you need Internet of Things, and you need talent as additional components for a digital supply network.
Excellent, Shalabh. And that builds beautifully onto our next question. Now that you've kind of identified some of those key components there, we'll put this over to Jim there. What are the key technological attributes that enable these digital supply networks to function in the modern age, as Shalabh had alluded to?
Yeah, I think Shalabh gave a good overview of the technology that's needed, and that's certainly core to what's needed as a tool for this technology to work. I go back to, why didn't we do digital supply networks back in the 1912, 1913, 1914 timeframe? And the answer there is because we didn't have cloud computing. So you can't do a digital supply network until you have cloud computing. Once you have cloud computing, the next thing we needed was some form of a permission-based connectivity, because I don't want to have to create my network by literally having to go out and do a connection with each one of these components of my network. What I want to have it make is much more like LinkedIn. I don't have to enter a big amount of information in my LinkedIn to connect with you, Nick. I just have to say invite, and you need to say accept. And then all of a sudden we will have a permission-based connectivity. You've given permission to connect to me. I've given permission to connect to you. And now we're connected, and it's almost instantaneous. And so that then allows us to have the end-to-end visibility. So we have the cloud computing, we have the permission-based connectivity, and then we have the end-to-end visibility, which, as Shalabh says, is critical. Without that, you're flying in the dark. You don't have a clue. Once you have that, then we add real-time monitoring to see how are we performing against the plan. And then we need the decision support tools and the AI, the ML, the Internet of Things, the whole range of tools that Shalabh mentioned are really critical to make that happen. When we have these, what I call 5 components, I think we now have the capability to create that digital twin, and therefore to make digital supply networks really, really, really work. And when you take a person that's been thinking about supply chains for their whole career, and now all of a sudden you bring them into the world of supply networks, they're going, oh my goodness, I now really can manage it. The reality is supply chain management was a misnomer because you couldn't manage your supply chain because you're only looking at a link. Now we can really do supply chain management by using digital supply networks. So it's kind of a play on words there.
Very interesting. And Shalabh, anything you would like to build off that?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think Jim again covered it very well. But the point I would like to add is that see, any kind of digital transformation of supply chain or building a digital supply network is a journey, right? And I think organizations also need to kind of divide this in different phases and see where do they stand. And just to answer this question, I would like to divide the journey with respect to different kind of technologies that you need to adopt while building a digital supply network, right? So the first, I mean, table stakes, all basic stuff, things like your data warehousing, your business intelligence capabilities, your ERP applitions, your data modeling. I think to surprise a lot of companies that we work with, many times they do not have even these basic stuff in place. I think if someone is not here, that's the place to start from, right? I think then comes the more advanced piece. So are most of your applications on cloud already? Do you have like the reporting or the visualizations in place? Have you actual kind of moved from a data warehouse to a data lake kind of environment? How are you thinking about cybersecurity across your supply chain? So when you are going on that path of digital transformation, cybersecurity is becoming very critical. And I think then comes the kind of true exponential things. So the things I talked about, your Internet of Things, how you're thinking about putting sensors across the entire logistical network, entire factories, entire product lifecycle management, the advanced machine learning and predictive analytics, which is, for example, building a lot of simulation capabilities on your supply chain around events, right? So those are the, I would say, the North Star for a digital supply network. And depending on where organizations are, where do they stand, what industry they come from, how complicated is their supply chain, one needs to start this journey.
Excellent. Excellent. Some great stuff we're addressing here, guys. And, it's very much talking about this in the abstract. So I think now's a great time to kind of switch gears. And, we'll put this out to you, Jim. How can businesses transition from an analog to a digital supply network? And what advice would you give to companies seeking to undertake this?
Well, I think it's critical not to boil the ocean, because we don't have enough heat to make that happen. And so we have to take a step at a time. I think the best way to do that, and as we start thinking about this transition process, is to look at where we came from. So the whole supply chain world before year 2000 was interested in efficiency. How can we take cost out of the supply chain? The only topic before year 2000 with respect to supply chain is cost reduction, reducing transportation, reducing inventory, making the warehouses smaller, giving us lower cost operations. And then beginning in 2001 up through something like 2009, we realized there's not only a reduction of the cost, but there's also an increase to the revenue by providing great customer service. So we went from an efficiency world to an efficiency and effectiveness world. And so we had an EE, efficiency and effectiveness. But starting in year 2020, there was a new awareness of supply chain. And in 2023, we went to an understanding of resilience and how can we be resilient. So that's the key to us understanding how do we begin a transition. The question we have to ask is, where are we least resilient? Where is it inbound? Is it outbound? Is it something internal to your operation? That's where we should begin. We should ask ourselves the question, where are we the weakest from a resilient point of view? And that's where we should start, because that's what's going to allow us to have the capability to make this thing happen. Now, when we do that, we have to be aware of the fact that this VUCA thing that I mentioned, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, is there. And what we need to understand is that if what we're trying to do is improve what we've done in the past, we're never going to catch up to the competition. And what we need to do, therefore, is quit focusing on the past and start focusing on the future. And so what we need to do for organizations is we got to ask the question, what do we want to accomplish to have a competitive advantage over our customers? Let's figure out what that is. Let's figure out where our resilience is the least. That's where we should get started. And don't try to boil it out. Don't try to do a big bang. Don't take too big. Take a specific issue that you can really grow competency in and become in advance and in front of the competition. Now you're going to see that future come to reality.
Fantastic. I don't think we can lay all the blame at your door for a shortage in tomato soup. I'm sure Mr. Warhol has a few things to answer for on that front.
Amen.
Excellent. And then moving on from that, Shalabh, what would be some of the common challenges in adopting a digital supply network, and how can they impact risk mitigation strategies?
Yeah. So I think, Nick, larger an organization, and like depending on their operations, the supply chains can be very complicated, right? And that also, for larger organizations, it brings a lot of bureaucracy within the organization itself. So there are organizational constraints and lot of times limitations of the human capital of the organization itself in achieving some kind of a goal. But I think a more pertinent challenge that I have observed personally, talking to a lot of supply chain professionals, is the lack of a clear roadmap. The things are changing so rapidly that people who take initiatives, they are not very certain that if they are going to invest behind something for next 1 year, 18 months, first of all, is it going to lead into measurable results or desired results? And then is it going to become obsolete after 18, 20 months? Then there are so many of technology providers, so many solutions out there, where it's hard to decide where to actually invest in. Do they actually integrate with each other? So I see a lot of supply chain leaders struggling with setting up a right roadmap. Uh, but I think now, since you have asked this question, so I have my thoughts on how to think about it. I think organizations, when they think about a digital supply chain network, they also need to think about what kind of key capabilities they are trying to build. Are they trying to build capabilities around intelligence, right? So basically, control towers, your AI, machine learning, collecting a lot of data around your supplier base, or is it more of visibility, as in visibility into the actual movement of the goods? So your RFIDs, your POS, alerts, GPS, collecting all of that data. Or do they need to prioritize building more agility, right? So for example, on-demand networks, autonomous processes, being very proactive about any kind of disruptions, or the kind of efficiency. Deploying more RPA, more robots, more AR/VR resources, a better order management system. So I think it will be difficult for any organization, irrespective of the resources they have, to say that we are going to build on all of these fronts. But just thinking about the key capability that we need to build, what are the tools and technologies that are at our disposal that we need to achieve that? And I think just building that one by one could be a good way to navigate through these challenges.
Yes,
I
certainly.
have a couple comments on that one, Nick. If I think Shalib's answer is right on. His first point he made of the lack of the human capital, I 100% agree with that. But I would even make it more pointed. That was I think Shalib was very politically correct with that statement. I want to get more to the issue. It's resistance to change, and you look at the chief supply chain officer of the company. He started out as a warehouse manager 35 years ago, and then he got promoted, and then he got promoted, and now he got promoted. And so he's been promoted all these years. He's now been to the company for 35 years. He's the chief supply chain officer. What's he going to do? Well, for 35 years, he did the same things, and he got promoted. He now's got a big house at the beach. He's got a big house at town. He put all 4 kids through school. He's got a nice boat. What he's going to do is the same thing he's always done. And so what we have is that, call it a limitation of human capital, call it resistance to change, whatever it is, he's stuck. And so he is a huge, huge, huge problem. And so we got to work past that. The second thing is, and to Shalib's point about the roadmap, 100% you got to have it. But the challenge we have here is the roadmap is not just what our company is going to do, but also our trading partners. Our trading partners might not be on our roadmap, and so they throw a wrench in the cog, and it doesn't turn anymore. And so what we need to do is we need to have teamwork. We need to have harmony. We need for the links of the network to think about, it's not about me, it's about us.
Yeah.
And it requires that teamwork and that harmony. And then lastly, we need a orchestration. Can you imagine having a orchestra that didn't have a conductor? If you have an orchestra that doesn't have a conductor, what you wind up with is noise, not music. But now the conductor pulls those people together and orchestrates it. And now what you have is a beautiful flow of information, materials, and cash from end to end that results in happy customers. And so I think really these are the things that kind of challenge us, that require a mitigation strategy. I certainly think addressing the people issue, addressing the roadmap issue, addressing the reality that you really need your links, your partners up and down all the way end to end to really, really, really be partners. And so it's an attitude we got to develop. And so not an easy thing to do, but my goodness, if we're going to be successful today, we got to do it. So it's a huge, huge, huge opportunity for us going forward.
Yeah, and I think very valid point, Jim. And given all the disruptions that we have seen, I think what we have also seen that it is increasingly becoming a topic which is more frequently discussed at the board level, like supply chain resilience, supply chain risk management. I think no more the top management of the company or the board can think that a supply chain officer would be responsible for managing the supply chain resilience end to end. And I think a lot more ownership is being taken at the very top level to derive these changes, which is, I think, how it's actually going to be materialized.
And this brings us to our final question of this fireside chat. We'll go back to you for this on Jim. And you may have alluded to this already. I'm not sure if you want to give their name out, but can you share a few real-world examples of companies or industries that have successfully implemented digital supply networks and undergone this transformation?
Well, you want me to go first on this? I'm happy to go first. The industry that I would focus on the most is the U.S. grocery industry. About 35% of all groceries that flow through the network today, which if you have 35%, you obviously got some of the big boys there. You don't have Walmart. That's one of the reasons it's as low as 35. But the flow through the grocery industry, back from the planning to the manufacturer, the wholesale, the distribution, and the retail, and taking it to store or taking it direct to consumer, has been a tremendous success. About 35% of all groceries are on digital supply networks. We're working there. We've had significant reductions in transportation costs, significant cost savings in inventory level, drastically improved customer satisfaction. We truly have a digital twin of the end-to-end supply chain, and the results have just been phenomenal. And so I tip my hats to the Krogers and the Safeways and Albertsons and so forth of the United States for really leading this. And they've gone to their suppliers and saying, if you want to sell to us, you will be on this network, because that's the only way we can synchronize and harmonize the total network. And so that would be the premier example that I would point to, where the benefits are really, really real. And everyone who goes to the grocery store today is feeling those benefits because they're getting the savings and reducing the cost of buying the product. So it's really a major, major, major case study.
Amazing.
Absolutely. And I'm sure, grocery prices are definitely hitting home for many at this time. So anything that can be done to bring those down certainly will get a lot of support. And again, we'll turn that final question over to you, Shalabh, as well. If there are any, industries or organizations that you think have been particularly successful in implementing these changes.
Yeah, I think this is a very important question, Nick, and I would want to share an example which can actually also act as an inspiration for a lot of organizations to expedite their overall transformation towards digital supply network. So the example here is Pfizer, right? And Pfizer started its digital transformation journey, building a digital supply network way in advance before the pandemic happened. And I believe, had it not been the case, I think the impact has not been only on Pfizer; it would have been on overall world, because what they were able to manage during the pandemic, it's only the result of all the advancements and the investments that they made in their supply chain 10 years in advance, right? So just some stats here. They have close to some 24,000 SKUs, some 200 contract manufacturers spread across 175 countries, producing hundreds of millions of vaccines a year, even before the pandemic, right? So uh, Pfizer started kind of moving their supply chain to the cloud in 2012. They actually launched something called highly orchestrated supply network to support all their suppliers, all their customers, by building this digital supply chain network connecting all the node. And they also heavily invested in AI and ML in the entire logistics and manufacturing capability. They also kind of launched an e-commerce space for these drugs. So I think a very relevant example, the other example I often talk about is Toyota, but I think this example is even more relevant to understand that a company's supply chain at times is not only relevant for the revenue or operations or shareholders of that particular company, it could have an impact on the overall world. So just think about any other company which has a large play or larger role today in terms of energy, in terms of food, in terms of any other kind of drugs or chemicals or even for that matter energy, right? So any such company and their supply chain function is holding a very important responsibility towards the public at large, to make sure that those supply chains are resilient.
Kind of interesting that we're talking about vaccines and medicines to help people be healthy, and we're talking about food. It's kind of cool. Those would be the two examples that Shalabh and I would come up with. I guess a wish would be, where's the semiconductor guys? Let's go. I mean, the challenge is here. Let's put in a digital supply network here. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think this has been a fantastic discussion. And again, I want to thank you for your time, Jim, and sharing these invaluable insights with us. If anyone has been affected by, any of the issues that we have discussed today, please feel free to visit the links or reach out to us directly. We'll be more than happy to assist you in any way that we can.